Do you like building but hate how long it takes? It can be so slow placing every block by hand. There must be a better way. Well, lucky for you, there is. It's called commands, and for only $99.99 a month, you can get all these commands today. That's right, today. But if you call now, we will throw in an extra /fill command for free. But wait, there's more, because there's not actually more. I just couldn't figure out a good way to end the infomercial bit. Anyways, these are my top 5 tips for how to build faster with commands. Let's get into it. Alright, we're not wasting any time. We're getting right into this first tip. But just a disclaimer for the video, they're gonna go from the simplest over to the most complex. So we should have something for every level here. And so the first tip I want to tell you is related to the /fill command. And this is really the bread and butter for building with commands. But I've got some tips that can help you just use the /fill command faster. So obviously, if you don't know how the /fill command works, just start with the basics and learn that. But if you already know, then here are my tips to help you go faster at it. First off, let's say we have this platform here and we want to fill from that corner to this corner with the wood. What we can do is we can do /fill, and then to quickly grab these coordinates, you can press tab twice, and that will automatically fill the coordinates right there. And then I press enter. It'll save those coordinates in your chat, so the next time you go up, you just press the up arrow. And then you can do it again in this corner, then you add your block, and boom, it's filled just like that. Now this is by default the tab key on a keyboard, but if you're on console, which I know a lot of Bedrock players are, there is another option. I think I remember where it is in the settings. Okay, I found it. So here in the creator settings, you can come here, enable copy coordinate UI, and as long as that's turned on, you can set some keybinds to do it automatically. Like here, I have C and X to copy the coordinates of where you are standing or where you're facing. What that'll also do is when you open the chat menu like this, in the top you'll see you have your coordinates up top, and you can press this button to copy it, or you can change it from your position to the block that you're looking at. So I can click copy there, /fill, and then I can click this button to paste it, or Control V if you're on keyboard, and then we can come over to this other side, grab the coordinates and do it again. And you'll notice I use that command to add a border around our blanks that we already filled, and that's using some of these arguments that are available within the command. These are all super useful and they're worth spending the time to learn, though most of them are pretty intuitive of what they do. And I actually have this perfect example of why you should learn these arguments. Because like I'm sure we've all been, I have my helipad almost complete, but I need to fill this whole area with a block. And so what you can do is come to a corner, get those coordinates, grab the coordinates from the other corner, and now we can use the keep argument, so it will only replace the area that's air. Now it did leave a little bit of grass behind, and so we could also do a replace grass command. And just a couple arguments later, we have a completed helipad and we didn't have to place a single block. So the arguments are definitely worth learning, but I've got one more example to show you guys how I use this when I'm making terrain. And so I've come over to a super flat world, and so you'll see I have this nice stone hill that I've created, but it doesn't really fit in because it's not covered in grass like the rest of the world. And so what I would do in a situation like this is come to one corner of the build, and we're gonna grab those coordinates. And then we're gonna come all the way over to the other corner of the build and grab those coordinates. And now I've modified the coordinates so it will be 30 blocks higher than the coordinates we picked, and I'm gonna fill it with sand. And it took a second, but you'll see we've dropped one layer of sand on top. Now I think it looks better if we do 2 layers, so I'm just gonna do this one more time, and then you'll see the gravity has dropped the sand on top of our build, so it looks very natural. Now all we need to do to turn this into grass is use those same arguments that we had before, and look at that, it's a pretty natural looking hill. And now obviously this doesn't have to be exclusively for making terrain. Like here I've made just kind of a cool pattern with lots of layers of concrete, and I think you get a cool effect, and it really shows that you can use that /fill with the replace command to get a lot of cool effects when you use gravity blocks like sand. But that's gonna end my TED Talk on the fill commands. Let's get into these second tips, and that's gonna be learn how to use this and this. And before we get into anything, I wanna let you know that this is called a tilde, but the cool kids call it a squiggle, and this is a caret, and the cool kids call it a caret. And the squiggle and the caret can be used in place of coordinates when you're doing any command. So for example, if you wanted to just set a block right where you are, you could use these tildes as the coordinates and then set it to anything, just like that. Now the difference between the tilde and the caret is easier to see than it is to explain, and so I've set up these 2 examples that I'll show you. First we'll start off with the tilde, and from a top view you can see that these coordinates are relative to the player. And so you see wherever I walk, it's always going to be about that far away from the player. Now in contrast, the caret is relative to the player's camera. And so you'll see in first person, it's always just where I'm looking. And if you get that top view, you can see it will follow my camera even when the player is not actually moving. And both the squiggle and the caret can be very useful in their own ways. I've got some more complex commands at the end of the video that wouldn't be possible without the tilde and caret, but they're also a bit more complex, so let's hold off on that for now. But for a simpler example that just about anybody could do, let's say we wanted to put a platform right here on the water just beneath our feet. We can do this real easily with a fill command and then set the coordinates to be right below our feet. And just like that, we've made a simple dock anywhere we want. Say we want to expand it this way, we can just run that same command and it will build us another one anywhere we are. Using these two to replace coordinates is honestly the biggest tip I can give you out of any video. This is what makes using commands to build so much faster for me personally. Now I'm going to move on to our third tip, and that's going to be how to copy and paste your builds in Minecraft, or the /clone command. Now the /clone command is really simple, just taking two pair of coordinates, and then you can use the clone command to copy those coordinates over to anywhere in your world, which is useful. But a structure block can do essentially the same thing, and it's probably a bit faster. But I think the clone command is still definitely worth learning because of the arguments that you can apply to it. Now a structure block doesn't have anything like these. I feel like replace is pretty self-explanatory, and masked means pretty much the same thing as keep when we were doing fill earlier, but the filtered argument is what I think makes this command so powerful. For example, what if we wanted to make this helipad a little more 3D and raise the H? You could go through and do it all by hand, or you could real quickly set up a clone command and filter for only the red concrete. And then just like that, it clones only the concrete, which is super useful if you're trying to sort through a huge build but only copy a specific block. I feel like this filtered argument seems really niche when I try to explain it, but it actually comes up pretty often. Like in my hole in the wall minigame, the filtered command was really the whole concept for why the blocks are able to interact with the wall like the TNT is. So I really think it's worth learning, but if you just want to stick with the structure blocks, I kind of see where you're coming from. And that's why my next tip is to learn the developer blocks. Now there are tons of developer blocks, and so I've thrown a few in the chest here, but I don't think this is even half of them. And of course, if you want to get any of these developer blocks in your world, you would just use a /give command like this one, and that will give you the block that you want. Now I think they all are super useful in their own ways, but the ones I use most often are when I'm trying to build a map and I want to section off specific areas. And for anything map building related, I always go to these 4 blocks. Now the first is the barrier, and the barrier is essentially an invisible block. And so we could make a path here out of barriers. And obviously they don't look invisible yet, but once you're not holding the barrier item, they'll disappear like this. And now you can interact with these just like any other block, except for they're indestructible and invisible to any player in survival mode. Now pretty similar to the barrier item is this border block. And this item will create a wall that goes up infinitely vertically. And so you'll see I built a wall out of these border blocks. And in creative mode, it has no effect on me. But when you're in survival mode, you're not able to get over these blocks no matter what you do. Now this is a very obvious example, but oftentimes I'll hide it either really high up in the sky or right here underneath the platform, so that you can get this invisible wall, but you don't actually have to see the barrier blocks. And a quick little bonus tip is they always let off these particles like you'll see here, but using this game rule, you can disable this entirely, and I honestly feel like this should be the default. Now these next 2 blocks go hand in hand, and that's the allow and deny block. And I'm just going to place some down and you'll really quickly see what they do. And so this only affects players who are in survival mode, but you'll see the brown are allow blocks and the gray are deny. And if I try to mine over these deny blocks, nothing happens, but I can mine over the allow blocks. And the same goes for placing, like you can hear me clicking. It only works over the allow blocks. Now using the allow and deny block can be super useful if you want to make adventure maps where there's lots of portions of the map that the player shouldn't be able to break, but then there's portions of the map where you do want them to be able to interact. And just as a little side note, the allow and deny blocks also work for players in adventure mode, where normally you wouldn't be able to mine anything, but you can break and place blocks that are over an allow block. If you want to get into map making, then I would say learning these developer blocks is an essential, because it can save you so much time and give you so much more control over what the player can and can't do. And a lot of them can be intimidating, but after a little bit of practice, you'll know what they do and they won't be too complex. But we're going to move on to my final tip, and this one might sound a little crazy, but you need to learn the scoreboard command. And I know talking about the scoreboard command in a building tutorial seems a little out of place, but it's actually super useful if you ever want to make shapes that involve using math. Now I had a lot of examples like this double helix or this spinning box that I created with the scoreboard command, but I'm going to show you all the commands to create a simple perfect sphere using these same techniques. Now of course, for any scoreboard you're going to have to first create it with this command, and then I'm just going to make it visible on the right side of the screen so that you can see what we're doing here. Now these first two commands are just going to be setting up the boat, and the boat is going to be the entity that we use to create a circle, but that'll make sense in a second. So I'll summon in a boat real quickly right here, and then I'm going to turn it on and you'll see what's going to happen. And so you'll see using the entity we generate a perfect circle like this. And the way we do this actually uses a lot of tips we've already talked about. So first we'll use the squiggles or tildes to teleport this boat in a circle spinning like this. Next we're going to use the scoreboard command, and we're going to slowly increase the scoreboard by 3 every time we spin it. And this is going to come into play just a little bit later. But next we're going to use this command with the carrots to place wool wherever the boat is looking. And then finally the scoreboard is going to come back in because we're going to be testing for when that boat is looking at 360 degrees, and then we know it's made a full circle, and we can teleport it to look just a little bit down so that it creates a new row of blocks just a little bit lower than the last. This final command will just test for when it hits that 360 degrees, reset the variable back to 0, and then we can just repeat this for all the layers of our sphere until we have a perfect sphere just like this, made with only command blocks. Now this example is the most simple just to make a perfect sphere, but this formula, just modified slightly, is the exact same way that I created all these shapes like the double helix or the spinning cube. So I think it's needless to say that the scoreboard command is 100% worth learning, but it is definitely the most complex. So maybe just start with your set blocks and your fill for now, and then go watch my tutorial when you're ready. So hopefully this helps you build faster, and I'll see you guys in the next one.